Hey, it's Luke from LT Gaming, and today I'm joined by Tom as we go through the 20 best Star Wars games to play in 2026. Just in time for May the 4th, the inevitable Star Wars sales, and all of us convincing ourselves we definitely have time to replay another 80-hour RPG. Now, a couple of quick things before we dive into this. We left out games like LEGO Star Wars because we haven't played them and our channel is a little bit more adult orientated, and also older picks like Shadow of the Empire or Rogue Squadron 3D, which are iconic but a little rough on modern systems. I'm also a huge expanded universe fan. I've collected over 70 Star Wars novels so far, so expect a little bias along the way. But I want to hear your Star Wars experiences in the comments below. That's very important to us. And before we enter hyperspace, hit the like button. It massively helps the channel, costs fewer credits than a dodgy blaster from Mos Eisley, and tells the algorithm this is the content you're looking for.
Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 is a game that basically looked at the first one and said, let's do it again, but faster. But to be real, there is still fun here. You're still a walking force disaster, you still fling enemies around like ragdolls, and you still carve up the stormtroopers with lightsabers and lightning. It's all good stuff. The action is snappier, the spectacle is bigger in places, and it has the core appeal that the first game had too. The problem is, it's over quite quickly, and it doesn't leave you with the same impact as the first game. The original had a bigger sense of adventure and a more memorable place in Star Wars gaming history, and the other issue is in 2026 it can be technically rough to get going. I've read about frame rate caps, physics weirdness, and just general PC faff, meaning it's not always the smoothest thing to get running. So the takeaway here is simple, it's fun but thin. But if you do want a few hours of Force chaos, go for it, it's a great title. Star Wars Bounty Hunter is the remaster of the old 2002 Jango Fett game, and it's a bit of Star Wars history, and it's cool to see it back. The appeal here is quite obvious. You're not Jedi, you're Jango Fett, blasting through the underworld before Attack of the Clones, and that alone gives it quite a different flavour to most Star Wars titles. The remaster is solid in the sense it makes an older game easier to access, and there's something charming about bounty hunting, jetpack movement, dual blasters, all that cool prequel era weirdness. But the big consideration is it really could use more of a gameplay overhaul as well. A lot of the old problems are still there, controls can feel quite frankly awful, camera is almost like a little battle of its own, and the platforming sections are not really my thing. So in 2026, Bounty Hunter is worth playing if you love Jango Fett, the prequel era, and you want a preserved slice of early 2000s Star Wars. As a game today, it's more interesting than essential, a solid remaster yes, but definitely not a perfect one.
Star Wars Outlaws is a modern canon pick here, so I'm gonna be pretty skeptical. But it does give us something Star Wars games weirdly had not really done before. A proper open world scoundrel adventure. I mean, why didn't they just pick Han Solo? It would have just been so much better. I'm currently reading the Han Solo Adventures by Brian Daley, and because they were written in the 1970s after the second film, they have a very unique lore which is kind of not really connected to the main Star Wars universe, and it's really fun watching Han Solo travel around and do all this crazy stuff. Then you have the later expanded universe backstory to Han Solo in the Han Solo trilogy, and also the Timothy Zahn novel Scoundrels. There is so much material here, right? But I digress. In this one you play as Kay Vess, kind of like a poor female Han Solo basically, moving between crime syndicates, sneaking into restricted areas, blasting your way out when things go wrong, and occasionally jumping into the Trailblazer for space combat. Now, credit to Ubisoft here somewhat. They did improve the game a lot since I first played it. In 2026, it's not the greatest Star Wars game ever made, but it is good if you want that underworld side of the galaxy. For canon era Star Wars, it gives you a nice slice of the galaxy that's messy, criminal, colourful, and very easy to enjoy. Once you stop expecting Knights of the Old Republic and embrace the Assassin's Creed Ubisoft style stuff.
Star Wars Dark Forces Remaster, and a personal favourite of mine because it's basically what would have happened if Doom and Star Wars had a baby, a slightly blocky, blaster heavy baby, but a beloved one for me. What made it good is it took that 90s FPS energy and gave it a proper Star Wars identity. You're Kyle, sneaking into Imperial facilities, blasting stormtroopers, dealing with secret weapons projects, and getting the ground level rebel operative fantasy before every Star Wars games decided you needed lightsabers and some sort of destiny crisis. The remaster does a good job of making it playable today, with modern resolution support and smooth performance. The consideration is that it is an old school shooter at heart. Level design can be a bit maze-like, and if someone didn't grow up on this style of FPS, it might be a bit of an adjustment. It's fast, punchy, atmospheric, and it has that lovely LucasArts charm. It's not the flashiest entry on the list for sure, but it's got a lot to like.
Star Wars Rebellion is one of the strangest and most ambitious strategy games LucasArts ever put out, and honestly it's a cult favourite of mine. Instead of just throwing you into battles, it hands you the whole Galactic Civil War and says to you, manage these fleets, build facilities, recruit heroes, run missions, win planets over, crush uprisings, and somehow keep the galaxy from collapsing into chaos. And it's a 4x strategy game that's run in real time, which is very unique. In 2026, this one still feels fascinating because it feels like the grand strategy Star Wars game we almost never got. It is old, awkward, and not exactly friendly to new players, but the fantasy is brilliant. Mon Mothma, Vader, Luke, Leia, Palpatine, secret missions, hidden bases, political loyalty, and massive fleets moving across the map. Empire at War is definitely the cleaner recommendation overall, but Rebellion is the deeper cut for anyone who wants Star Wars to feel like a full galactic power struggle. The only issue here is that when I checked it today, it has been delisted from Steam and GOG, so I don't know what's happening there. Hopefully it comes back soon.
Star Wars The Force Unleashed now, and this is one of those games that absolutely understood the appeal of being absurdly powerful in the Star Wars universe. You play as Starkiller, Darth Vader's secret apprentice, and the whole thing is basically built around making the Force feel violent, messy, and completely over the top. It's great. Throwing stormtroopers around, ripping through enemies with lightning and lightsaber combos, and just generally having a bloody good time. Story's pretty memorable too. I think Starkiller was a strong character, even if it sits outside of modern canon. The big consideration here is that it has aged quite poorly in places. The PC version is a nightmare to get running smoothly, and camera and controls do feel a bit rough. Weirdly though, I'd recommend playing this one on handheld. If you've got something like a Steam Deck and you get it behaving, it's a great little game to pick up. Star Wars Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast is one of the games that still gets mentioned today for a very simple reason in my mind. The lightsaber combat is absolutely on point. You play as Kyle and it already gives a lovely bit of expanded universe flavour. But I think the real magic is how dangerous and expressive the game feels once it properly opens up. You have to consider your movement, timing, force powers, your lightsaber style and enemy positioning, and it all clicks together. You're going to get this proper feeling of being a Jedi duelist, and not many games have matched this. The consideration is it can be a bit uneven, especially early on before you get into all the good stuff. Some of the level design and shooter sections are very much from those early 2000s PC action era, for better and worse. But in this day and age, Jedi Outcast 2 earns its place because even though it's old and a little bit awkward at times, when you're deflecting blaster fire, throwing your enemies around with the Force and cutting down swaths of them with your lightsaber, it feels like one of the most purest Jedi power fantasies that Star Wars gaming has ever produced.
The original Battlefront games are still some of the easiest Star Wars games to recommend because they understand the fantasy immediately. Pick a side, spawn as a trooper, charge into chaos, jump into vehicles, and fight across the most iconic battles in the saga. The first game nails that simple frontline soldier feeling, while Battlefront 2 expands the formula with space battles, playable heroes, more eras, and that brilliant one more match energy. And in 2026, we're talking about the original pandemic classics here, not the 2024 Classic Collection. That doesn't seem to have been very well received, though I might pick it up just to try it out as I've never played it. These games, however, which I decided to combine into one entry, still have that slightly scrappy toy box magic feel that newer Star Wars games don't always capture. You've got clones, droids, rebels, stormtroopers, Jedi, starfighters, command posts, and absolute nonsense happening every 30 seconds. They are pretty old, yes, and the player base remains small, which might drive you towards that classic collection, but they remain pure comfort food for Star Wars fans.
Star Wars Episode 1 Racer is a game where the pitch is so simple I almost don't need to explain it. You take the pod racing scene from a Phantom Menace, turn the speed up to insane, and somehow it makes an iconic racer out of it. What makes it so good is the feeling of speed. Even now, it absolutely flies. Tracks have that old LucasArts variety, different planets have distinct flavour, and with a big roster of racers, upgrades and ridiculous engines screaming away, it just captures pure chaos with pod racing brilliance. It's Star Wars, but not Jedi, not blasters, not Galactic War, just speed, danger, and just a boatload of fun. Consideration is here, it's a 1999 racing game, so it's fairly simple by modern standards. There's only so much depth here once the nostalgia turbo wears off, but honestly the core handling and sense of momentum hold up very well. And with a new Star Wars racing game on the way, checking this out is not a bad warm up at all. It's like stretching before exercise, except that exercise is doing 900 miles an hour through a canyon. What's not to like with that?
Knights of the Old Republic 2 is the darker, stranger follow-up to BioWare's classic, this time from Obsidian. Set 5 years after the first game, the Jedi have been hunted almost to extinction. The Republic is falling apart and you play as an exiled Jedi slowly reconnecting with the Force while being pulled through one of the bleakest corners of Star Wars. And that's why it still stands out in 2026, to be honest. This game is messy in places, but it also is one of the most interesting Star Wars stories ever told, digging into the Force, the Jedi, the Sith, and the cost of these endless galactic wars. And also the Old Republic is just awesome, such a fascinating part of Star Wars, and the part of Star Wars that actually brought me back into the fold, I have to say. With Steam Workshop support and the famous restored content mod helping smooth out its rough edges, this is essential if you like your Star Wars a little more philosophical, broken, and morally uncomfortable. But if you want to see Star Wars truly broken, just watch the sequel films. I mean, Disney, come on.
Coming on to Star Wars Republic Commando next, and for me this remains one of the most refreshing Star Wars games, because it doesn't put you in Jedi robes and hand you a lightsaber. Instead it drops you into the Clone Wars as the leader of Delta's squad, with a rifle and 3 very capable lads. What made it so good was it wasn't just a standard shooter with a Star Wars wallpaper. The squad command system gave you this tactical feel that always kept the game fun without becoming fiddly. Layer on top great gunplay, memorable music, and an epic campaign that gives you a ground level view of the prequel era, and there's not much to dislike here. Of course, you gotta consider this is a 2005 shooter. It's kinda short, fairly linear, and some parts do naturally show their age. So for me, in 2026, Republic Commando is a bit of a time capsule. It's just a genuinely good game that showed a bit of a different side of the Star Wars universe. Star Wars Galactic Battlegrounds Saga, and frankly the pitch alone is enough for me. Star Wars meets classic base building RTS, sign me up. This one worked for me because it borrowed very heavily from Age of Empires style of design. It actually uses the same engine, and then it dressed it up in a full Star Wars toy box. You got factions, base building, resource gathering, tech progression, big armies, everything you could want. And the campaigns are really great too. Now, if you've played Age of Empires 2, you'll immediately recognise the bones underneath, but honestly that's not really a complaint for me. They're very good bones. The bigger issue is I think this game badly needs a remaster. Cleaner UI, modern resolution support, smoother multiplayer. The full treatment could breathe a breath of fresh air into this one. So in 2026, Galactic Battlegrounds earns its spot because it's Star Wars and RTS, and that's a brilliant combination.
Jedi Academy is still one of the purest Jedi power fantasies in gaming. You can create your own student at Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy, build your lightsaber, pick missions across the galaxy, and gradually turn into an acrobatic force-powered menace with single sabers, dual sabers, or the full Darth Maul double-bladed setup. Remember when we all saw that back in the cinema in the old times? That was so awesome. In 2026, the reason this still hits is simple. The lightsaber combat is still brilliant and the mod scene keeps it alive. The movie Duels mod especially turns it into a massive cinematic Star Wars playground, letting you replay and remix iconic battles from across the saga with updated characters, arenas, and set-piece chaos. Jedi Academy was already a classic, but with mods it becomes one of the best ways to just boot up Star Wars and start swinging a lightsaber.
Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2, and we are slightly cheating here by folding the series together because Battlefront is more about the one fantasy, being dropped into the middle of a massive Star Wars battle and just getting on with it. Both of these games are still a nostalgic high point for a lot of people. Space battles, playable heroes, loads of maps, and a campaign with a wonderful sense of Star Wars chaos. You were essentially just one trooper in a much bigger war, or at least that's how it felt. Now I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the big loot box scandal around this, which was just pure corporate greed, but thankfully, thanks to the player base, was shot down eventually. But in 2026, I think the Battlefront games earn their spot because at its best, no Star Wars game captures the large-scale ground and space warfare quite like it.
X-Wing Alliance is one of those classic Star Wars space combat games, putting you in the cockpit during the Galactic Civil War with proper mission-based flying, capital ship battles, convoy work, rebel operations, and eventually the Battle of Endor itself. It also has a slightly different angle from the earlier X-Wing games because you start out as part of a neutral trading family before being pulled deeper into the fight against the Empire. And in 2026, the big reason this is still worth playing is the X-Wing Alliance upgrade mod. The base game is obviously pretty ancient now, but this mod transforms the visual ships, cockpits, effects, and general presentation so dramatically that it feels like the classic Star Wars flight sim has been given a second life. If you want that proper old school pilot fantasy with shields, lasers, warheads, wingmen, star destroyers, and the Millennium Falcon, this is still one of the best ways to get it. And although we couldn't fit every Star Wars game on this list, a quick shout out to X-Wing and TIE Fighter. There's also mods available for those which greatly improve them.
Okay, we got Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and honestly for me the pitch alone was enough to get me excited. A proper single player Jedi adventure with some Souls-like combat, what's not to like? The best thing, it largely delivers on that fantasy. Combat is satisfying, challenging and rewarding once you get it. You weren't able to button mash your way through all the stormtroopers, you had to time your parries, manage enemies and use your force powers properly and slowly grow into the Jedi role. Pair that together with a steady sense of progression and the whole game had a really strong adventure rhythm. I liked the main character Cal as well. You felt him grow throughout the game, his relationships, his trauma and slowly rebuilding of his confidence, and it gave the game some emotional spine. Considerations are, it's not perfect of course, particularly the backtracking could really drag for me, but in 2026 I think it earns a spot here because it re-established what a modern Star Wars game could be, and ultimately it made feel becoming a Jedi genuinely earned.
Star Wars Galaxy's Restoration is a fan revival of one of the most ambitious Star Wars games ever made. This is not a normal theme park MMO where you just follow quest markers until the numbers go up. It's a sandbox galaxy of professions, crafting, player cities, Jedi, and all the weird social systems that made Galaxies feel so different. And in 2026, Restoration is still such a fun pick, because it keeps alive the Star Wars fantasy that modern games still barely touch, just living in the galaxy. Not necessarily being the chosen one, not always saving the Republic, but becoming a weaponsmith, pilot, mayor, dancer, which I did a little bit of, which was a bit weird, trader, hunter, or whatever strange role you carve out for yourself. It's old school, a bit intimidating and absolutely not slick in the modern sense, but if you want Star Wars to feel like a living world rather than just another campaign, this is still one of the most fascinating ways to experience it. It's also totally free and doesn't require the original Star Wars Galaxies game. If you're interested, check out the full feature I did on this, I'll leave a link to it in the description below. Empire at War is still the ultimate Star Wars strategy sandbox. You take command of the Rebellion, the Empire, or in Forces of Corruption, the criminal underworld. Then fight across the galaxy through space battles, ground invasions, heroes, fleet, planetary control, and the occasional deeply balanced superweapon called the Death Star. And in 2026, this one is honestly stronger than ever because the modding scene has basically turned it into a full Star Wars strategy platform. There's nothing like it, to be honest. It's absolutely incredible what they've done with it. Whether you want Clone Wars, Galactic Civil War, Throne Era Legends, or let's call it Expanded Universe, who's saying Legends around here, or huge cinematic fleet battles, Empire at War is still where Star Wars strategy lives. It is old, I'll say that, it sometimes is a bit clunky, but watching Star Destroyers, Mon Calamari cruisers, X-Wings and TIE Fighters smash into each other still hits exactly the way it should. The Old Republic is basically what happens when Knights of the Old Republic's era gets turned into a full MMO. And this one holds a special place in my heart because 8 years after the Disney sequels, it's what brought me back to Star Wars. Imagine taking a fanatic like me and taking Star Wars in such a bad direction that I stayed away from it for 8 years. That's crazy. And you can see that Star Wars resurgence in me on the channel. This year I've made feature videos on the Star Wars Galaxy's Restoration mod and the Interworlds mod for X4 Foundations. And it all started with me installing and playing the Old Republic and giving Star Wars another chance again. But this title lets you play more than 3,000 years before the films. It lets you play as a Jedi, Sith, bounty hunter, smuggler, trooper, agent and more. Each with their own class, story, companion choices and a ridiculous amount of Star Wars content. The great thing about this one is although it's an MMO, you can pretty much play all of the stories single player. In 2026, this is still one of the biggest Star Wars experiences you could actually jump into for free. Of course it has aged in place faces, but the amount of story here is massive, and some of the class campaigns are still brilliant slices of Old Republic lore. The Old Republic is essentially a sprawling galactic archive where you can lose 100 hours and somehow still only feel like you've just scratched the surface. I know after making this video, this is the one I'll be playing tonight. Knights of the Old Republic is the big one. BioWare's legendary Star Wars RPG set thousands of years before the films, back when the Jedi and Sith were out in force and the galaxy felt wide open again. You build your own character, gather a crew aboard the Ebon Hawk, visit worlds like Tatooine and Kashyyyk, and shape your journey through light side and dark side choices, and there's some really fun decisions to be made in this one. Playing dark side on my Nintendo Switch recently has been so much fun. And in 2026, Knights of the Old Republic still earns its place because it's not just one of the best Star Wars games, it's one of the best RPGs, full stop. Yeah, okay, the combat and presentation are still very much from 2003, but the writing, party members and lore still hit incredibly hard. This is pure Old Republic myth making, and look what it opened up to us. And it remains one of the strongest examples of Star Wars stepping away from the films and becoming something massive in its own right. A true gem that everyone should play, and if you pop into our Discord, I'll probably give away a number of copies of this in the next week or two. So come on in. I've been Luke from LT Gaming, and Tom has been Tom. Well, as I always say, from LT Gaming, enjoy all of these games and may the Force be with you.